Welcome back to Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement, with Mr. Sahir Khan as our guest. He is at the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy at the University of Ottawa. Sahir, thanks again for joining us today.
My pleasure, Tony.
Obviously, the big elephant in the room is historic debt levels for Canada. You made mention of historic low interest rates. That's helpful. But I want you to put on your hat, your prediction hat, and you get your crystal ball out. First of all, where should we go from here? And that presupposes that you got a prediction as to what the global economic structure is going to look like in the next few years.
Well, I think you're right to start with. So what do we know about where the economy is going? And I think the reality is we don't. And so we go back to the kind of the scenarios the government laid out in the economic statement, and we can go in any number of directions. We talked in the earlier segment about feedback loops, about an engaged parliament and opposition members kind of holding government's feet to the fire on the indicators of success or failure, weakness in the economy, and having appropriate, timely responses. But at the same time, turning the taps off on a timely basis and replacing things like income support with the type of kind of timely, targeted, temporary stimulus. Let's kind of get the economy kind of on its own, running on its own inertia. And that's going to be critical to get ensuring that long-term this government is taking advantage of low interest rates, but at the same time, ensuring that the level of debt that is kind of being added to in this crisis environment starts to decline relative to the GDP. And so two things have to happen. One is you don't want spending to keep increasing at a rate that's greater than the growth of the economy. And number two, you need that economy growing, because that's the revenue that's going to come in and keep those coffers full. If it doesn't happen, then all of a sudden you're starting to think about tax increases and other measures to bring in additional revenue. And it's something that very few politicians like to do. I'm not going to give a value judgment on whether it's good or not. I think in some cases, like the GST, actually was a conservative idea. And I think part of why we have a sustainable federal fiscal structure because of a courageous decision to have this kind of GST, this value-added tax in Canada. So there not all taxes are great, but there are better ones than others. So I think what we're really looking for as we head into the budget is keeping one eye on the economy and the labor market, seeing what other countries are doing to kind of pull themselves out of this. I think we want to see kind of at the same time the taps are being turned off on income support by the federal government, we want to see that slack being picked up with a little bit of stimulus. We're really hoping for kind of a V-shaped recovery in the labor market and with companies, across Canada, large and small. And then I think at that point, you're just hoping the government focuses on those areas where there's remaining weakness in terms of this type of support. And the rest of it's going to be the type of timely, targeted, temporary infrastructure type spending that gets the economy going, but where we can actually turn off the tap in 2-3 years and get back to a declining debt to GDP track over the long term. To me, that's kind of, I would say, the magic formula. It's a lot of unknowns there. But if we're trying to, draw a box around this, I think those are kind of the four corners that we're aiming to kind of describe.
Yeah, we've got less than a minute left in our program, but it's tough in a minority parliament. Minority parliaments tend to be more expensive, not less expensive, because right. You kind of spend your way out of political logjams. So is that one of your worries?
It's hard. It's definitely difficult. If you think about program review in the 90s, it was done with a majority government. You can imagine, there was the Reform Party actually gave a big push to get this work done, but you also had credit markets really knocking on the door of the federal government saying you've got to make changes here. And but as you probably recall, the government won successive majorities while cutting spending. So I think if the public is really aware and understands that this is necessary to ensure that the next generation is saddled with a large amount of debt and potentially unproductive debt, the difference between just transfers and building infrastructure that's going to support a productive economy, then you want to have one eye on where those taps get turned off and when stimulus and the natural inertia of the economy kind of takes over. So I think this is, it's difficult. You're right. Not a lot of political parties, going to be putting the brakes on in Parliament in a minority context. It takes leadership. It takes pressure from all corners of the economy, and hopefully with a little bit of luck as well. And you really hope to see a recovery in small and large businesses alike that really pull this economy along.
We're out of time, unfortunately, but I want to thank Sahir Khan for a great presentation. Lots to talk about. We hope to have you back in the near future.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Thank
Good
you.
time.